everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online. Welcome to our live session this morning. Today we are going to be baking with butternut squash. And first we're going to talk about how you can cook the squash, and then we'll go ahead and make a dessert with the squash. We're going to be making butternut squash flan. You'll love it. So baking with squash is a good way to get your vegetable with your dessert because squash is a vegetable. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm sure that you've seen these in the produce section of your grocery store before. This is a butternut squash. It's got a lighter skin on it than some of the other squashes, like pumpkin is a squash, you know, with the orange skin. Acorn squash, those are usually typically lumpy and a variety of different colors, and the spaghetti squash too. These all fall into the squash family. They taste uniquely different, and what I like about the butternut squash is it has a rich kind of sweet flavor to it, just a little bit different than pumpkin, but it can be used interchangeably with the pumpkin. So this is the squash, peanut shaped, light skin, and sometimes you'll see them, you know, small, large, skinny, kind of fat like this one. So they're all equally the same. It just depends on, you know, really how much squash you need. And typically they're about, on average, about $1 a pound. So nothing too expensive. So let's go ahead and talk about cooking the squash. So what I did for the recipe, and this is how I like to cook my squash, I like to cut the squash in half. First, you're going to cut off the end because this is really hard. It's very like woody. So cut this off before you cut the squash in half. So not too many seeds like you would see in the pumpkin or some other squashes. So what you're going to do is remove the seeds. Just kind of spoon them out. It's pretty easy to do. And as you can see, this squash is a nice orange, like a bright orange color. This is a very typical color for this squash. And like I said, you know, not too many seeds is real easy to clean out. Just go ahead and get these seeds, some of this stringiness out. You can roast these seeds and use them for your desserts or just for snacking. What you can do is, you know, clean them up and get some of this stringiness off of them. And you can soak them like in a little bit of salt water. And then you can roast them just with some salt or even some spices too. You can make them pretty tangy with some Cajun or peppery spices. So this is it, pretty easy. And I like to roast my squash in the oven while I'm doing my other work. I think it works out really well. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the seeds out. Might want to use a little bit larger spoon. This one kind of had a small cavity. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger. And it might not take you as long if you use a larger spoon than the one I'm using. Okay, so squash is clean, ready to go. Super simple. Take a pan, just put the squash on the pan. I like to put mine right side up. Some people face them down, either way. And I put just a little bit of water in here, cover it with foil, put it in a 350-degree oven, and just check it every now and then, and you'll be able to feel if it's soft enough or poke it with a fork. Typically, a squash this size is going to take about an hour and a half, just to give you an idea. So super easy. You just, you know, put a little water, cover it with foil, kind of seal the edges a little bit, and it's going to work on its own. Let's go ahead and take a look at some squash that I baked earlier. Okay, so this is how the squash is going to look once it's baked. It's really soft. It changed in color just a little bit, but now this squash needs to be processed a little bit before you can use it for your dessert. Okay, so like the cavity with the seeds, there were some strings in there. There's also some stringiness in the squash. So you're going to want to put this through a food mill, which I have right here. Okay. So this is just a mini food mill, and this presses the squash through these little holes in the bottom, and that's what's going to get rid of that stringiness. So this is kind of a smaller model. They actually make these a little bit bigger if you have one or if you're interested in one. If you're just doing a little bit here and there, this will work, but you might want to get the larger one too. So let's go ahead and take a look at getting some of this squash through the food mill. And do we have any questions on baking the squash or anything like that, buying squash? The skin comes off pretty easy. I always try to tear it. You can try to take it off with a fork. I always try to do this before I actually go into cutting it. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so it's being a little stubborn. So let's go ahead and cut some of this off.
How long do you bake or roast the seeds?
The question is how long would you roast the seeds? Depending on the size of the seeds, it's going to matter. But for the smaller seeds, they would probably only take maybe 10, 12 minutes. Just keep an eye on them so they don't get too dark. But I do like to soak mine in a little bit of salt water before I roast them. It kind of hydrates them and flavors them a little bit. But definitely try roasting your seeds. You can use them really nice garnish for your dessert. Okay, so sometimes the skin is going to come off pretty easy, and then sometimes you're going to have to just go ahead and cut it off a little bit.
Can you peel the squash before you bake it, or do you wait till after?
The question is, should you take the skin off before you bake it? You can. I like to just go ahead and put it in the oven just like this, but you can definitely take the skin off before you bake it. Okay. Now that we've got some of our skin off, let's go ahead and put some of this through our mini food mill. I'm going to cut this up. And definitely let me know if you have any questions. Since this is a smaller mill, we're just going to start out putting a little bit in. And the food mill is not sitting in the bottom. And you're just going to press this through, and it's going to kind of work on its own. And it's definitely going to go through. Like I said, this is a little bit smaller model. It's going to take a little bit longer. So please let me know if you have any questions. You could also use something that's called a ricer. And the ricer is, it's round, it's kind of like a cup shape, and that will push the squash through as well. So either food mill or ricer, both will work just fine. So it goes around pretty easy. So we're just going to go ahead and get some squash here for our recipe. And please let me know if you have any questions. What you can kind of do with these food mills when there's a lot of stringiness, you can kind of just go back and forth a little bit to get everything pushed through. But it just takes a little time, and before you know it, you'll have your squash puree. So you can buy this in a can. They sell organic versions of the butternut squash, and I do recommend trying the fresh though and processing it yourself. Pumpkins, some canned pumpkins actually include a variety of squashes, and they're not 100% pure pumpkin unless that says so on the label. Okay, so we're getting some nice butternut squash puree through our little food mill here, and we're just about done. So what I'm going to do is, since we're making flan, I've got my sugar here, we're going to go ahead and start our sugar And this is just some sugar and water, and it's going to cook until it's a light amber color. Go ahead and mix this up a little bit. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So we've got a decent amount of squash. We're going to go ahead and cut up the rest of the squash and pass it to the mill, and then we'll be moving on to make our flan. So I'm just wondering, has anyone ever cooked their own pumpkin for their pumpkin pies, or even cooked their own squash for their desserts? Or is this perhaps maybe something that's new?
I like golden nugget squash in place of mashed potatoes.
Oh. Okay. Well, like I said, we're going to go ahead and cut up a little bit more of this squash. And about half the squash should be good for this flan recipe that we're making. We'll go ahead and take the skin off. Like I said, sometimes you can get this off by just using a fork, but it's just a little stubborn today. And it was mentioned too, taking the skin off ahead of time, which is okay. I just kind of like to get my squash in the oven and let it start working. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our sugar. Starting to boil. Just going to cook this until it's an amber color. And this is going to go in the bottom of the ramekin for the flan. Okay, let's go ahead and mill this around a little bit more. Like I said, these mini ones can be kind of arduous. So if you're going to be using your food mill more often, I would definitely invest in a larger version. Okay. And please let me know if you have any questions. We've got our sugar working on the stove over there. This is looking very good. We're going to go ahead and pop the rest of this squash in, push it through, and then we'll be ready to make our flans. Okay, we're not going to be using this one, so we'll go ahead and set this aside. These mills are great for just all kinds of things like this. These are especially good for apples as well. If you're ever going to make some apple puree by hand, I know that there's a lot of machines that you can make that with, but it works equally as well. So let's go ahead and push the last of this through. So food mills, these are just one of these pieces of equipment that, it's been around for a long time. This is something that Auguste Escoffier would have used. I have one from my grandmother. So really, really traditional tool in the kitchen. I think that's probably why I like it so much. Okay, so looking good. We definitely have plenty of puree for our flan dessert. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions on anything. Kind of clean up a little bit. We kind of got splash everywhere. Well, I did. Okay, so this is our sugar base for our flan. Like I said, we're going to be cooking this until it's amber in color, and then we're going to pour it in the ramekin. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our flan mixture. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our sugar And then we're going to put our butternut squash puree. No strings in here. It looks great. It's nice and smooth. Going to go ahead and measure this out. Okay, so it looks like we have exactly enough with our half. I like the butternut squash. Like I said, it's just a nice orange color, and it's rich and it's sweet. If you compare it when you're tasting the pumpkin, you'll see a difference. There's not a real big difference, but you will see a difference in this. Okay, so we're going to mix this together. Then we're going to add our eggs, our vanilla, and lastly our cream. Okay. Like anything else, if you're using the canned version, it's just going to be not quite as vibrant. You kind of lose something when you're canning. But I have had some nice organic canned butternut squash. But please try making this yourself first. Okay, this is the squash, sugar. We're going to be adding our eggs. And it looks like our sugar is getting there. It's starting to get a little bit of color to it. So this is a nice dessert for the fall. And keep in mind too, with a lot of your pumpkin desserts, you can substitute the butternut squash. Like with your pies, you can make butternut squash cake instead of pumpkin, or even butternut squash bread. And a lot of times when you're using pumpkin, you'll see the classic, pumpkin pie spices, the cinnamon, the ginger, and the clove, and the nutmeg. And with butternut squash, I usually like to just use a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of orange. And this will give it just a nice flavor, and it'll let the actual flavor of the butternut squash come through. So you can add the cinnamons and things, but I recommend just adding a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of the orange. Okay, so these are ramekins for our butternut squash flan. So this mixture is a nice amber color. It's perfect. You're going to want to get it off the fire before it actually starts to smoke at all. Okay, so this gets poured into these little ramekins. Okay, so you're going to want to let this set up a little bit before you put the flan mixture on top. Okay, so let's go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to finish our flan. Okay, so I've got my half and half, which we're going to be warming up. I'm going to add a little bit of orange. And we're just going to let this warm up a little bit. It's not going to simmer. We're just going to bring it up to about 90 or 100 degrees. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some vanilla here. I like to have a little bit extra on the vanilla. You can use an orange extract too, but I kind of like the butternut squash too. When I'm making something with butternut squash, I like the flavor to kind of be its own. So that's why I choose the orange and some vanilla. I like to actually add a little bit extra vanilla. Okay. Okay, so our half and half is perfectly warm. It's about 90, 95 degrees. I'm going to add this into this mixture. And then we are ready to fill our flan as soon as we strain this. Although we put the squash through the food mill, we're still going to strain this in case there's any pieces or even any I need like pieces of egg. I always like to make sure my flan mixture is nice and smooth without any little lumps in it. So let's go ahead and strain this, and then we will fill our flans. Grab our whisk and kind of push this through a little bit. Sometimes you just need to help it through when you've got some eggs and you're putting it through these real fine meshy strainers. Okay, so our mix, it looks great, doesn't it? And it's a nice orange color for the fall. And I like to use these little plastic deli containers for filling. So we've got our ramekins that have our sugar base. Now we're going to add our custard flan mixture. And I think I can get it in here without splashing. Okay. I like to use these little deli containers because you can kind of squeeze them and make a little spout. Okay. These are going to get baked at 350 degrees. What you're going to do first before you bake these is you've got to put some water in this pan because it's going to help these custards bake slowly. So put enough water in the pan to cover the ramekin about halfway. It can be a little bit under. And bake them at 350. If you notice that the sides are starting to get a little darker, maybe bubbly, go ahead and turn the oven down to 325 and just let them finish like that. And you're going to bake them until they're set. You're going to shake it, and if there's no jiggling in the middle, then the flan is done. Usually these take about maybe 45 minutes or so, but definitely keep a close eye on them. So let's go ahead and take a look at some flan that I made earlier.
What size are your ramekins as far as ounces?
Okay, these ramekins are, I've got some 6-ounce ramekins here, and you can use smaller ones or larger ones too. You can actually even make the flan as one in a 10-inch cake pan too. But keep in mind when you're doing just one that it's going to take a lot longer. But this is super beautiful dessert. You can unmold it whole and you can decorate it with fruit. You can put it on a platter. I highly recommend doing that too. The individual ones are nice, but whole flan is very stunning. And you can even make it in kind of a bundt pan too for something different, a little bit different effect. Okay, so let's go ahead and unmold our flan and we'll do a nice little plated dessert. Okay, let's go ahead and check out this flan that I made earlier. Okay, so with the flan, you're going to want to cut around the edge. So you've got to release this because it's going to be inverted, and the sugar on the bottom melts and it kind of it drips over the sides. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and unmold this. And that's our butternut squash flan. So it looks super beautiful. It's a nice color to it. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of a garnish on here. And does anyone have any questions on actually, putting the flan together or baking the flan? Okay. So I've got a few things here that we'll go ahead and use for a garnish. Got some strawberries, some pomegranate seeds, a little bit of mango, some mint, and I also I sauteed some apples earlier with some cinnamon sugar and some butter, and these are a really nice complement to the flan. The nice fall addition. So we're going to go ahead and add some of these. And really, it's limitless, whatever you want to serve with your flan.
How
Okay.
well does it go with pork as a main dish?
Oh, okay. How well does it go with pork? Excellent. This is a really nice compliment. Sometimes you'll see butternut squash served with pork dishes. You may see a butternut squash casserole. So super nice flavor. Perfect. Good mention of that. Really nice with pork. Highly recommend that. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll put, just a little bit of fruit on here. I've got some mango slices. And I'm going to put a little bit of mango on top as well. So, it's an easy dessert. It took a little time to make the butternut squash, but I think it's totally worth it. Try it, compare it to the canned and see which one you like better. I think that you'll really like the fresh better. And it's a nice addition, and it's not too much work. Like I said, the squash, you just pop it in the oven and it kind of works on its own. Maybe put a little strawberry on here. Maybe we'll put some strawberry slices as well. And you can definitely garnish this however you like. And I do highly recommend trying one single flan, like in a 9-inch or a 10-inch pan. Let's go ahead and put some mint on here to finish this off. And do we have any questions? Because we're getting ready to say our goodbyes. This is our very pretty dessert, our butternut squash. I've got some pomegranate seeds, just sprinkling over this for some nice color. These are nice this time of year.
How long would you say this dish takes from start to finish?
How long would this take from start to finish? Well, what you can do is your squash is going to bake for about 1.5 hours in the oven. So go ahead, get that in the oven right away. Then you can prepare the rest of the dessert. You can, the ramekins with the sugar, you can prepare those in advance. You can even prepare them a day in advance and keep them covered at room temperature. So you can be preparing your sugar and your ramekins while the squash is cooking, and then you can prepare your flan mixture as well. Just kind of have all of your ingredients. You can get your sugar in the bowl, and then once the squash comes out and it's cool, you can go ahead and mill it while it's still a little bit warm. Be careful if it's hot, but warm is just fine. And it should probably take you to prepare this maybe an hour and 45 minutes, depending on how long your squash bakes. And then about another maybe hour allow for cooking of the flan, just in case it takes a little bit less, a little bit more. But like I said, 2 things you can prepare in advance: your ramekins with your sugar, and you can even bake your squash in advance too. So a lot of the time in preparing this is actual cooking time between the squash and the flan baking in the oven. So definitely work around there. And you kind of had an idea. It didn't take me a real long time to mill the squash and actually make the flan mixture. So I hope that's helpful to you. But definitely try this. It would be a nice addition with the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. So I'm going to top this off with, I made some sugar garnishes earlier, and I just melted some sugar down, and then I kind of just really drizzled it on a silpat. I did it in this grid, but you can just, kind of spoon it kind of randomly. So it's a super nice addition to this dessert. It adds some height, some negative space. It goes with the color scheme. So this is our butternut squash flan. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll see you next time. And please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank
Chef.
you. Thank you.